Some days I do wake up and it all feels too hard. It feels like we're just the little guys fighting against these big institutions. But I know I won't be able to turn my back on it. There's too much at stake. There's too many people that have been harmed. And I can't give up. I need to keep fighting.
We consider that this event is the greatest single tragedy in the history of the Australian Health Service. People receiving a life-saving treatment have been infected with a life-taking virus.
The issues with the blood service in the 70s, 80s and 90s in Australia was one of the hardest stories that I ever investigated. It's a story that has not been told in full because a lot of people don't want it to be told in full.
Up to 20,000 Australians are believed to have caught hepatitis C through blood transfusions.
I was told that I was now stage 4 liver disease, and it was like, I was absolutely shocked. I was terrified that I was going to die.
400 to 500 people with haemophilia or other bleeding disorders developed HIV, and the majority of those have died of that condition.
Martin was 14 when we told him. To tell a 14-year-old boy that he's got AIDS, it was just horrendous.
Probably the most difficult part of the whole issue was the lack of support from the Australian government over what had happened.
Australia is the last large Commonwealth country not to have had its own infected blood inquiry.
A lot of people died because the Red Cross got its priorities wrong.
It just ruined the lives of so many people.
We were told we had one of the safest blood supplies in the world. But if that's the case, how did so many get infected? This might be our last shot at some kind of justice.
I'm feeling quite anxious, but at the same time, I'm very excited. A lot of work has gone into getting us to this point.
For years, I didn't want to think about the contaminated blood issue. I wanted to move on with my life. Then I heard about the UK inquiry and thought I should look into this.
This is a full-time job for him, basically. He is always working on it, either if he's on the phone or if he's on his laptop, on his desk. He just wants to help people. He wants to make things right.
I'm on my way to meet with Tony and Neil. We have a series of meetings lined up with some politicians. I'm really not too sure what to expect, but I'm hoping that they're willing to get on board with the issue and support us moving forward. Hey, how are you?
Good, Tristan. How are you?
Yeah, good. Shall we head in?
We're often told that this is a historical issue, but what they fail to remember is that people are still suffering and people are still dying.
I'm hoping that when we meet with the politicians today, they listen to our stories, they look at our evidence.
Yeah, I'm Shane.
I'm Shane, Tristan.
And that they see that there's been a travesty of injustices here.
When I was 18 months old, learning to walk, falling down, I started to bruise a lot. And soon enough, they figured out that it was haemophilia. Haemophilia is a bleeding disorder where your blood doesn't clot. Before the 1970s, life for a haemophiliac was quite miserable. If you had a bleed, it meant a lengthy stay in hospital. That could be days, weeks, even months. You'd be in a lot of pain. And the treatment that was used to stop bleeding back then took quite a bit of time to administer. Then along came factor VIII. It was a clotting factor that was injected intravenously.
Tristan is about to have factor VIII for bad bruising on his foot.
It was a game changer for haemophiliacs. Basically, you could be treated at home.
Next, we have Tristan Stanley.
South Australia's best, competing for the World Cup. Bad luck.
And you could live almost a normal life. But for thousands of us, this product turned out to be poison. In 1990, my parents received a phone call. It was from a person they'd never spoken to before, and they said, unfortunately, that I'd been infected with hepatitis C. There was a lot of stigma attached to hepatitis C. If you were infected, it was assumed you were either a drug user or that you were infectious, or both. There were times where I was questioned whether or not it was safe for me to swim in the same pool as other kids. There was rumours that would go around school about me. As I moved into my teenage years, it became a little more problematic. You start to date girls. Parents of those girls find out that you're infected. They get concerned, as they should.
When I first got together with Tristan, he was in the band. I was really into band guys at the time. He was pretty upfront about it. I mean, it was a bit of a shock, but I really liked him. I could tell it affected his liver quite a lot. It took a lot out of him.
On this one again, on the second fret top string.
As a dad, my energy levels weren't the same as other dads. I slept a lot. It took me decades to clear the virus. I went through multiple treatment options. Some of those treatments had horrible side effects. I was told recently by my GP that although I have cleared the virus, this has had an effect on my life expectancy and that it will catch up with me eventually.
It's hard for them to understand exactly what's happening.
Overall, I consider myself to be very lucky. The virus hasn't affected me as drastically as what it has Tony and Neil.
What transplant number are you up to now?
I've had a few, up to number 3.
Like Tristan, I also have haemophilia, and I was infected with hepatitis C from blood products. Being a haemophiliac, severely affected, there wasn't a lot of things that I was allowed to do. But when I was 25, my GP told me that doing physical exercise on a regular basis would stop the joints from getting arthritic and stiffening up, so I started playing darts. Turns out I was pretty good at darts.
The North Queenslander with haemophilia took on the best and won, becoming Australia's first world darts champion.
My career peaked around 2004, and as the liver started deteriorating and decompensating, my stamina was getting depleted. And by 2008, ended up at Royal Perth Hospital, told that I was now stage 4 liver disease, that I had 6 months to live and I required a liver transplant. I ended up having to get a second transplant, and that then failed as well 2 weeks after. And I was then told that I was now dying, and I lost nearly half of my body weight. And a third transplant became available May in 2020.
These are my medications here. I've got to just take these. I have these tablets for immunosuppression to stop rejection, and I take an antibiotic for the rest of my life because I had to have my spleen removed due to complications with the hepatitis C.
Basically, I was told this is it. If this liver fails, I can't get another transplant because there's not enough connective tissue to attach another liver.
Well, probably a little different to both Tony and yourself. I'd gone in for surgery in 1989, the end of 1989, at the conclusion of which I've received 2 units of blood.
Mm-hmm. I was infected with hepatitis C, and that came about as a result of a contaminated blood transfusion. My job at that time became exceptionally difficult.
So it had a massive effect on your life as far as your career goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At that point in time, I was a very young superintendent with the AFP. I had a fairly good career in front of me.
I'd be sitting in my office, I'd have a plastic bag in my garbage can. I'd vomit in that plastic bag, I'd tie it up and try and get rid of it. I was constantly feeling sick and ill. It's certainly alienated me from a lot of my colleagues and friends. I've had to turn around and tell my then wife that, yes, this is what's happened, and that certainly started to create issues. I was not medically fit to work, which resulted in me having to take early retirement from the AFP.
Doesn't make you feel very good, does it?
No.
Particularly where you've gone into a medical environment, having full faith in a system that they're going to treat you properly, and whatever product they use on you is not going to be contaminated.
A group from work had been talking about it, so we came and gave blood today.
Australia was always told it had one of the best blood supplies in the world, one of the safest blood supplies in the world. Here it was seen that everyone who was donating was germ-free and pathogen-free. But during the 70s, 80s and 90s, people were being infected by bad blood.
Thousands of Australians have had their lives tragically damaged by being given transfusions of blood that was infected with hepatitis C.
Hep C would eventually become known as the silent killer. Although it was known to be in the blood supply from the early 1970s, it was considered to be a relatively mild disease. By the time I was infected in the mid-80s, they were aware of just how serious it was.
The argument always was given that there was a greater harm in not giving these products to people who needed them. But I think there was a greater need at the time to make sure that what they were giving these patients wasn't going to kill them later on.
While thousands of people like me were being infected with hepatitis C, another deadly virus hit the blood supply.
AIDS, Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, looms as the greatest health crisis to face this country in a generation. If Australia reflects the San Francisco experience, probably 88% of cases will be homosexual men. The rest will be mostly mainline drug users and haemophiliacs.
When AIDS first arrived in Australia in the early 80s, people were asking questions about the safety of our blood supply and how susceptible it was to people carrying the HIV virus.
I was working as a haematologist and cancer specialist, and initially when HIV came in for the first time, there was a lot of fear about catching the disease, particularly with respect to haemophiliacs because of the nature of the blood product they received.
In this cold store at the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories in Melbourne, blood plasma is stored before being processed into Factor VIII, a life-giving serum for haemophiliacs.
Factor VIII concentrate was made in an industrial process, and each batch of Factor VIII concentrate involved maybe 1,500, 2,000 donors.
These are the starting materials that we receive from the Red Cross. This is a typical donation from a donor.
You only needed one donor to be infected to contaminate the whole batch.
Up to 30 people here in Queensland suffering from haemophilia may have been treated with a deadly extract suspected of being contaminated with the disease AIDS.
There had been a number of instances where Factor VIII had been contaminated with HIV, so naturally people were very concerned. My parents were very concerned, but they were told to continue to use the products and that the risk was minimal.
For haemophiliacs, are there particular problems?
Well, in that they're getting lots of blood products on numerous occasions, and these have been pooled from numerous donors. Yes, they are at risk, but I would think that the chances of them getting it in this instance are probably fairly small.
That turned out to be terrible advice. Hundreds of haemophiliacs were infected with HIV and most of them died.
I looked after about 15 patients in a regional city, and all but one contracted HIV from Factor VIII concentrate and died of that condition. I think all of us who are treating haemophilia face the dilemma that we had inadvertently probably infected most of our patients. And that takes quite a lot of processing. You're trying to do good, but in fact you've done harm. Once it was identified that there was a new infection in the blood supply that led to severe and fatal illness, the Red Cross should have instituted clearer policies on excluding high-risk donors earlier. 95% of all the Red Cross's work is great. My concern's only restricted to that relatively limited period of time where I think they could have done better.
It was very difficult to criticise the Red Cross at the time because every time you wrote a story, they were saying you were putting the blood supply in danger. But they knew that some of these donors were infected and they still took their blood.
A dying teenage boy has gone to the Supreme Court claiming damages for being infected with the AIDS virus.
In the late 80s and early 90s, there were some high-profile litigation cases regarding the infections of HIV, hepatitis C. The first case that ran in Australia was the Martin Hatch case.
The young haemophiliac is suing a Sydney hospital and 2 agencies involved in blood transfusions.
Martin was a mild haemophiliac. He was infected with HIV when he was 10 or 11. Martin wrote a story about how he felt about contracting the AIDS virus. He described his life as a storybook with the last page ripped out. And that's what it was. He didn't know how it was going to end. And we didn't know how it was going to end. It was terrible. Martin was in hospital at the time for most of that case, and I would go to the courts in the morning. Now, the defendants, I remember going into the court one day and they had a cast of thousands. Our barristers, they acted pro bono. They actually brought the findings of Martin's case down on the day of Martin's funeral, and I'm glad that he wasn't here to hear what the findings were.
In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court has cleared health services of negligence in the AIDS infection of a teenage haemophiliac.
Martin's case illustrated just how hard it was to prove legal liability, even though it was without question the blood products that caused his HIV infection.
I ran the first successful HIV litigation in Australia and the HIV litigation for HIV sufferers around Australia between about 1989 and 1994.
I believe insufficient steps have been taken to protect and make safe the product which they relied on.
The Red Cross said that our obligation is not to be perfect, it's to conduct our blood supply with reasonable prudence. But there was no getting away from the fact that they knew, at least by 1982, that the disease was bloodborne and that there were risk groups who should be excluded from being donors because they were much more likely to be carrying the virus. People who shared needles, for example, people who went to tattoo parlours, and gay men who had more than one partner. And for a period there, they simply didn't do it. In the period 1981 to about 1984, Australia had the highest transfusion AIDS rate per capita in the world.
Back then, the Red Cross was a state-based organisation funded by the state and federal governments. The Commonwealth Serum Laboratories were owned by the federal government. Neither of them ever admitted liability. In the early 90s, the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories were privatised and the government granted them indemnity for any legal action regarding the blood products.
The Red Cross, it's fair to say, fought those cases as hard as any other defendant that I've ever been opposed to. The federal government, which owned CSL, took a dogmatic and very, very aggressive attitude against these cases. So it was a pretty willing fight.
There is a better way to resolve these claims than by taking every one of them to trial and then settling after several days of trial.
The federal government were hostile towards the state government settling. However, the lawyers were able to exert enough pressure to get the state and federal governments to come to the table.
Guided by the work that Peter had already done in HIV, I ran the hepatitis C litigation for hundreds of Australians. The arguments were really shaped around why it was that the Red Cross didn't do what was available to it to make the blood supply as safe as it could be.
In the end, it comes down to one central thing, and that is you had a test which would have substantially reduced the risk of infection, and you didn't use it. And we say it should have been used.
The counter arguments that were put at the time was that available screening mechanisms would have excluded a lot of people who in fact didn't have hepatitis, and that would have put the supply of blood at risk. We had to commence proceedings in every state and territory to get the states and the Commonwealth and the Red Cross to understand that what had happened wasn't right and they needed to compensate people.
When I became Health Minister, it became clear that we did have a problem. I think one of my early decisions was, to what extent is this a moral issue? To what extent is this a legal issue? I thought, no, this is a moral issue. People who had become Hep C positive through a fault of ours would have to spend large sums of money in legal processes, and that actually the government also would be spending large sums of money, and I just thought that was completely pointless. It would be far better for that money to go to compensation.
So the first government to agree to a resolution scheme was the ACT government.
I think that in combination of medically acquired HIV and medically acquired hepatitis C, Andrew and I together acted for about 1,000 people who all received compensation.
My parents met with Andrew Grech at the time and they were told we couldn't be helped. That came back to the fact that there was no way of identifying which donation infected us.
During the time that we acted in the Hep C cases, it was one of the sad parts of conducting that litigation that we had to tell the Haemophilia Foundation that we didn't think their members, the people that had haemophilia, could successfully litigate cases.
I can remember my parents being very angry about that. The way our products were manufactured made them higher risk of infection. They pulled thousands of donations together. So to be told you're not eligible for compensation because you cannot identify which donation infected you, it's a kick in the guts. Over 1,000 haemophiliacs, including Tony and myself, were locked out of the Hep C compensation schemes. Many other blood transfusion victims who were infected with Hep C were also never compensated. And so people started pushing for an inquiry into hepatitis C.
Why is it that some people have been given compensation and people in exactly the same circumstances haven't?
I think one of the biggest drivers towards the Senate inquiry was that the Reverend Bill Cruz, a very respected figure, came forward.
This issue for me is really personal. My late wife, she was told she got hepatitis C through a blood transfusion. We were able to trace it back, and her health was never the same.
If they'd have just said sorry, I would feel so much better. We made a mistake.
The outcome of the Senate inquiry was a big disappointment.
The Senate inquiry was a 4-day inquiry. You cannot investigate this issue in 4 days.
Australians infected with hepatitis C through blood transfusions are bitterly disappointed with a Senate inquiry that's refused to award them compensation.
We decided that the finger shouldn't be pointed and blame shouldn't be apportioned to people who acted in the best possible interest on the best possible advice available at the time.
I was absolutely devastated looking at the recommendations and outcomes that the inquiry had come to.
We were to get a national apology. It's never happened.
I felt that a lot of people had been totally let down, and certainly none of the issues had properly been addressed.
For years after that inquiry, it felt like the door had been slammed shut on any kind of justice. But then we saw what was happening in the UK.
A 7-year public inquiry into the infected blood scandal has identified a catalogue of failures by the NHS and successive governments.
A few years ago, the UK had their own infected blood inquiry, and the results of that inquiry were life-changing for the victims.
The harm that was done to people cannot adequately be put into words. Now is the time, finally, for national recognition of this disaster, for proper compensation, and for vindication for all those who have been so terribly wronged.
Many of us who had given up looked at what they had done and thought, maybe it's not too late for us.
Tristan.
Michael, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So you just come in today then, is it?
Yeah, I did, yeah. 6 a.m.
Recently, I met up with one of the lawyers who played a key part in their inquiry to get some advice.
So one of the main responses that we do get from politicians when we write to them is that there was an extensive Senate inquiry.
Extensive?
And it certainly wasn't extensive.
No.
It went for 4 days.
That's shocking, that is, yeah.
Nobody was compelled to give evidence.
And you compare that to the UK, where it was 4 or 5 years of really intense hearings, week in, week out.
The UK Infected Blood Inquiry gave its full final report in the summer of 2024. The inquiry found that Hep C or HIV infections, like many of the blood infections, was entirely preventable if it had been sourced at the right place, scanned and treated properly. The inquiry recommended a broad brush compensation scheme where you're not having to fight or prove every single bit of loss.
There are differences with what happened in the UK compared to what happened in Australia, but there was also similarities. Patients being falsely reassured that their products were safe. People were not told of their diagnosis, therefore preventing them from receiving timely treatment or putting them at risk of infecting others.
When I first got involved, we started writing to the government saying, what about a UK inquiry? And they'd say, well, you've already had one, what's your problem? It's just, everything you're saying was happening 10, 15 years ago in the UK. You know, it's easy for me to say, but you've just got to keep going. You've got to get the politicians behind you.
Yes, yeah.
Tony and I had been going through research papers, medical records and government documents to try and piece together what happened. Some of the more concerning documents we found, are from the 1980s, when many of the infections occurred. We found cabinet in confidence documents that show the government were clearly aware of some serious issues at the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, where our blood products were made.
The government were espousing that the Commonwealth Serum Laboratory and the blood industry was world class and that we were getting the best available products. So when I read these documents, I felt sick in the stomach.
1985, it states here that if the department enforced the Commonwealth's own code of good manufacturing practice, the facilities would be closed down immediately, as not one area of the facility complies with the code. It goes on to say, a failure to upgrade could have grave political implications for the government and the department. It is only a question of time before there are increasingly frequent and serious occurrences of producing blood factors that are contaminated.
It also says that some recent batches of Factor VIII have failed to meet the sterility standards.
So essentially, they've requested funding in 1985, and in 1988, the facility is still not up to code.
It makes me question if safety was a priority. We recently went to Canberra to try and make our case.
There are people from the past that are still here today that are still suffering the consequences of those decisions made at that period of time. And there's been nothing done to actually change that for them.
Personally, I'm very sorry for what you've had to endure. So we need to work at every level of government to address this issue. There's a need to acknowledge the past, to accept it, and then to apologise.
And address the issues.
Address the issue.
Yes.
Senator Roberts, nice to meet you. I'm Tristan.
They claimed at the time that they'd used best practice, but once again, that had never been properly put to the test.
We've asked questions of the National Blood Authority, the Department of Health, ministers. No one wants to answer questions directly.
There's one document in particular that I do want to show you today. This document actually talks about the state of the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories in 1985.
It strikes me that we need a response on the basis of all of that information. I'm more than happy for this to be the starting point of our discussions, not the end. And thank you, because it's not always easy to speak up.
After the meetings in Canberra, I felt very enthusiastic. I felt like the ministers and senators that we met with listened. I'm hoping that we can eventually get the answers that people have been searching for 30 to 40 years.
I do think of Martin every day. Martin suffered the worst. We can't get over that, but we can get, firstly, an apology from the government.
I'm still advocating today because justice has not been served. The victims, if you want to call it that, were not treated with the loving compassion they deserved.
We want to know what happened to us. We have the right to know. I've been patient for so long, been biting my tongue, and I'm sick of biting my tongue.
Judging by the documents that we've been able to uncover so far, it's pretty clear that we haven't been told the full story of what happened, and I think it's time that we are told the truth. We deserve that. There's unfinished business, and I'll keep fighting for as long as it takes.